Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Lindsay Lemmer of Madison is a member of the Madison City Council and a Democratic candidate in the 48th Assembly District. The primary will be August 11th. Lindsay, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve.
Well, as a council member, you'll be voting on the school board recommendation to withdraw SROs from the Madison's four high schools. The whole backdrop of this is a cause nationally and statewide in Madison for police reform. So you want to talk about how you're going to approach that vote, please?
Sure. And thank you for the question. I think with regards to SROs, the council should look to and support the decisions of our school board. This is the purview of the school board, and they have made their voice heard. They voted unanimously to remove the SROs, and I think it is the role of the council to support their decision. So I intend to support that with my vote. Regarding that, being within the backdrop of protests, people have been protesting about fundamental issues of systemic injustice. And this is a time where we need to take action to reform systems, to invest in solutions that end disparities. And, I will say that, acts of violence, such as firebombing the city county building, unfortunately detract from the important conversations that we need to be having about making systemic change happen. And acts of violence cannot be condoned. At the same time, protests that are happening are about people standing up and speaking out because our systems have failed them for too long. And they are a response to changes that are long overdue that need to be made.
Well, you sound like your vote to pull the SROs is just step one. Talk to me about what you would recommend as steps 2 and 3 as we fight racism and these other ills that have been around a long time.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I do want to say that, I want to talk to the impetus for this question and where we are at in our world. The video of George Floyd's murder has made it impossible for those who would deny or minimize the need for significant reforms. Mr. Floyd's murder has caused a reckoning, and as an elected official, I am not going to let this moment pass. I am the only candidate in this race to vote in support of initiatives to create the Civilian Oversight Board here in Madison. Mm-hmm. I sponsored developing the independent auditor position, and I sponsored acceptance of the MPD ad hoc committee report. And what I'm hearing from people throughout the 48th Assembly District is that they want both public safety and accountability. We are at a state where we are reimagining what public safety means. At the state level, I fully support the legislative package that has been introduced by the governor and lieutenant governor, and I will work hard as their ally to get these reforms enacted. And I think it's worth mentioning, too, that the package is in large part supported by the Wisconsin Professional Police Association. I also think that we need to look at some, substantial prison reforms. Our criminal justice system is both a result and a contributor to the systemic racism and economic inequalities that we've been talking about.
Who should be released from prison without jeopardizing public safety, Lindsay?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I think that people who are serving time for nonviolent offenses, drug offenses, we need to look at these as potential solutions. Wisconsin spends more on prisons than our UW system, and our prison population has more than tripled in the past 25 years while crime rates are dropping. I think we should be looking at transitioning eligible nonviolent offenders out of the system, and this would be a way of saving money as well. According to Corrections Secretary Kevin Carr, the annual cost of keeping an adult in custody for a year is about $34,000, whereas the cost of keeping that same individual under supervision instead is less than $6,000.
Part of this debate is the debate over whether to legalize medical and recreational marijuana. Where are you on that issue?
Mm-hmm. I support legalizing both medical marijuana and recreational use of marijuana. I was a supporter of Chris Taylor's bill to legalize medical marijuana, and I am a supporter of the bill that has been introduced a number of times by Representative Sargent to legalize recreational use. I think the most dangerous aspect of marijuana is that it is illegal. And this is, a substantial contributor to the inequities that we've been talking about. Youth are imprisoned for minor charges that are, and this is devastating the rest of their lives. And so I am for legalizing both medical and recreational uses.
The governor has also recommended a People's Commission that would draw the next boundary lines for congressional, Senate, and Assembly districts, as opposed to the current constitutional rule that the party in power draws them. Fair to say that you're with the governor on that issue?
Absolutely. We absolutely need to create a nonpartisan redistricting commission to draw Wisconsin's electoral maps. Voters should be choosing their representatives, not the other way around. Everybody's vote should count equally. And Wisconsin has been held up as one of the worst examples of political gerrymandering in the nation. Having a nonpartisan redistricting commission is broadly supported. According to a January 2019 Marquette University Law School poll, 72% of their respondents supported having a nonpartisan commission draw our maps, and only 18% thought the legislature should do it. I can tell you in my thousands of conversations with residents throughout the 48th Assembly District, this is an issue that is very important to them as well. And they strongly support not just having a nonpartisan redistricting commission, but making it a top priority. Voting rights, fair access to the ballot box is something that is important to me personally, and something that I have worked very hard on. As a communications chair for the Dane County Voter ID Coalition, which is a coalition led by the NAACP and the League of Women Voters, I have worked hard to improve access to the ballot box by building awareness of the resources available for people to get an ID in order to vote and to get registered to vote. So protecting everyone's vote is something that is very important to me, something I've dedicated a lot of time to, and I would be a strong advocate for nonpartisan redistricting.
The governor has warned that economic damage from the pandemic may result in a $2 billion with a B less in state tax collections in this fiscal year that just started. If you're in the assembly, that's tough choices. You either have to cut spending or raise revenues through raising taxes or fees. Where are you if you have to confront those choices?
Yeah, it is a tough position that we are in, to say the least. I think budgets are about priorities and that they should reflect our values. I will prioritize investing in our education system. I think it is even more important in times of economic downturn. And that includes investing in education at all levels, from pre-K to our Wisconsin Technical College system, to K through 12, to our University of Wisconsin system, and making sure that there are crucial career development resources such as apprenticeships. I will also prioritize initiatives that reduce disparities, initiatives to increase voter participation, and protecting our environment. As a legislator, I will look to find opportunities for savings without diminishing the quality of the key services that Wisconsinites have come to expect and deserve. I think that we need to look at additional sources of revenue, such as expanding Medicaid. In the current budget, Republicans chose to spend state tax dollars on Medicaid and other health services that could have been paid for by accepting federal funds for expansion. And, as I mentioned before, I believe there are substantial savings to be had by reforming our correction system. Again, Wisconsin spends more state tax dollars on prisons than our UW system. And by looking at some smart reforms that wouldn't just be the fiscally responsible thing to do, they would be the morally right thing to do. I think we can find savings in reforming our correction system.
Let's talk about property taxes. Local governments like the council in which you serve deal with levy limits that have been around for a number of years and caps on what they can levy in property taxes. The backdrop, of course, is Wisconsin is a high property tax state, but if you pass a referendum, you can exceed those. As a member of the Assembly, would you vote to keep those levy limits and caps in place or get rid of them?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I can say, as a local elected official, I understand how challenging it is for local governments to provide quality services while the costs continue to increase. More and more we are seeing municipal costs go up as our populations increase, while our share from the state in terms of revenue continues to decline. In fact, we saw a decline of 47% in revenue from the state to county and municipal governments between 1996 and 2020. And I also want to say people are being pinched so much right now. Property taxes have been too high for a long time, and especially in this time of COVID-19, people are struggling to make ends meet. People are struggling to stay in their homes. I think this reflects a fundamentally flawed system in which too much of the burden is being placed on average homeowners and small business owners, and they are paying more than their fair share. The system is also a contributor to the substantial inequities that we see in education throughout the state. For example, we do not meet the 2/3 funding commitment to our schools, and this is another way that the burden is being increased on property taxpayers. And this is being magnified, by dollars being diverted to private voucher schools that should be going to our school districts. Republicans have created loopholes and so-called tax credits for big businesses, leaving the average homeowner to shoulder more of that burden. I think we need to do things like close a dark store loophole, and that is something that, a bill to do that had co-sponsorship from more than half of the legislature, yet the speaker is so beholden to corporate special interest lobbyists that he wouldn't even bring it to a vote. So I think this, the entire system needs to change, and we need to look at reforms overall.
Well, a follow-up question on that. Local governments rely so much on property tax that is it time to consider some alternative revenue sources? Let me throw out two. Broadening the 5% state sales tax to now exempt products and services, one option. Number two, giving cities, villages the option of enacting local option half-cent sales taxes. Is it time to consider options like that?
It's a great question. And, again, it truly is a very difficult and serious challenge for local legislators because their hands are tied. I think, something absolutely needs to change. Whether increasing sales tax is the answer, I don't think it is, because that is, a regressive tax. I think we need to, look at things like, we need to reform how we are funding our schools. I think, we do need to look for additional funding streams. I think there are regional solutions that we should be exploring. I think that would perhaps be the way to go. Regional solutions over a sales tax increase.
For years, we've been fighting over how to find a stable funding source for our highways. Our gas tax, 30.9 cents per gallon, hasn't been raised in more than 10 years. Is it time to consider raising the gas tax to provide a stable source of funding for our highways?
Again, I think that we need to look for regional solutions. Raising the gas tax would not be my first option. Okay. Regional solutions, I think, should be thoroughly explored before we resort to that.
Two questions on the COVID pandemic. It hits the economy and healthcare providers that state government rely on especially hard. It increases the demands on safety net programs like Medicaid. If you remember the Assembly voting on the next state budget, should hospitals should hospitals be a higher priority in the next budget? They
should absolutely be a higher priority in the next budget. Our hospitals, our medical system have gone above and beyond in the face of this unprecedented challenge of COVID-19. And at the same time, doing so has resulted in billions of dollars of lost revenue. So they should absolutely be a high priority. And I also think that we need to look at fully expanding Medicaid. If Wisconsin were to fully expand Medicaid, more than 80,000 adults would be covered by Badger Care. And that change would yield a net savings for state taxpayers of about $190 million per year. And I think that would also help our hospital system.
Follow-up question on COVID. Businesses say if we follow all the prescribed COVID-19 health and safety standards, we should have legal immunity from frivolous lawsuits. Do you agree?
I think consumers and patients really need to be protected and have a course of action in situations of negligence or misconduct, and that there are protections in existence already that minimize the opportunity for frivolous lawsuits.
I want to ask you about a study that said in 2015, out-of-state contractors were awarded $72 million in contracts for public works projects authorized by local governments. By 2018, 3 years later, that $72 million had doubled to $146 million. The question is, should bidding standards and requirements give preferences to Wisconsin companies when local governments authorize these public works projects?
Yes, they absolutely should. We need to work to keep those contracts in state. We are facing record numbers of unemployment. We're facing serious threats to our economy. We need to do what we can to keep those jobs in the state, create that multiplier effect, and prioritize our economy. And I think that is one example of why it is so important to restore workers' rights and things like prevailing wage laws. Due to the repeal of state prevailing wage laws, we saw a number of municipal projects go out of state. In fact, we saw a nearly 40% increase from 2015 to 2018 in the number of out-of-state contractors winning municipal public works projects.
Two final questions. We've talked about a lot of issues. I want to give you a chance to surface any of your main campaign issues that we haven't yet discussed. Anything else?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I have to tell you, education comes up over and over again in my conversations with people throughout the 48th Assembly District. Protecting our education system, investing in the funding that students across the state deserve is something that I am completely committed to. Protecting all types of education and really making it a top priority. And that is something that is so important in a time of economic downturn as well. Our state is only as strong as our schools. And another issue that we did speak to that folks care very deeply about in this district is fair maps. Making sure that everybody's vote counts equally. And that is something that I will prioritize as the next representative for this district. People are very concerned about voting rights and making sure that we finally have fair maps. And those are things that I will work strongly to achieve.
And then the final question, the 48th is an open seat. Why are you the most qualified candidate to fill it?
Yeah, thank you. I am the only candidate in this race that has a proven track record of getting results both as an elected official and as an advocate. My experience, my background, and my record of getting results really set me apart in this race. Melissa Sargent has represented this district, and she leaves big shoes to fill. I think the people in this district are looking for a leader like Melissa to represent them in the assembly. As an alder, I championed the Market Ready program, which is a business training and microgrant program. I voted to increase access to affordable clean energy. I worked on ordinances to reduce harmful plastic waste. And I'm also the only candidate in this race to vote in support of the creation of the Civilian Oversight Board in Madison.
Okay.
In addition to that, as the president of the Madison and Wisconsin chapters of the National Organization for Women, I have fought discriminatory and anti-choice legislation, and I have mobilized coalitions in support of equal rights. As the communications chair for the Dane County Voter ID Coalition, which is a coalition led by the NAACP and the League of Women Voters, I work to protect voting rights, and I work to make sure everybody's vote counted. I have been endorsed by more current and former elected officials than any of my opponents in this race. And I believe my proven track record of getting things done, my knowledge of policy, and my ability to stand up for our shared values and work collaboratively to make change happen set me apart in this race.
I apologize, Lindsay. I just have one more question. When I interview candidates from Madison for both the Senate and the Assembly, some have taken a position on the expansion of F35As at Truax. Do you have a position on that?
Mm-hmm. Well, this was a federal decision. It has always been a federal decision, and the federal government has decided that F-35s are going to be bedded down at Truax. As the representative for my aldermanic district, I did stand up for concerns that I heard throughout my district. That said, it's an issue that there's a lot of mixed diversity of opinion about throughout the 48th Assembly District. I had voiced concerns based on the amount of noise in a heavily populated area. I think what we need to do now is work to provide mitigation to address those concerns that still exist. So okay. I believe my role at this point is to work for mitigation for the people who are impacted and to make this work for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay Lemmer of Madison is a Madison Alder and a Democratic candidate in the 48th Assembly District. The primary is August 11th. Lindsay, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much for your time, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.